So I wanted to talk about one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to recover from chronic pain, when they're dealing with chronic pain. And it's a big one and it's really common. So let's talk about it. So my name is Lindsey Ford. I am a chronic pain and trauma coach. So that means that I help anybody who is struggling with chronic physical or emotional pain or trauma. And I help them to recover. I help them to work through their stuff and get back to living, get back to being pain-free. So that's what I'm all about. So pleased to meet you. So today we're going to talk about one of the really big common mistakes that people make when they have chronic pain and what to do about it. So the biggie that I see all the time is believing that your pain is caused by structural damage in your body. Now I know it's really counterintuitive to believe that it's not. However, there's loads and loads of evidence to support the fact that actually chronic pain, which is long-lasting pain, is a completely different thing, completely different mechanism, and a completely different reason why it's there as acute pain, which is short-term pain. So chronic doesn't mean that it's really bad. It just means that it's there for a long time. Okay. So we're talking about chronic pain. Now, acute pain is, yes, that is definitely there because of damage, and it's there to tell you about damage, okay? Chronic pain, so persistent pain that you've had for a long time, or that kind of keeps coming and going repeatedly over a long period of time, like migraines, for example. They are actually not about structural damage in your body. Okay, so let me give you some examples as to why we believe this, why we think this is. And there's been an awful lot of research done on this now to support all of this, all of these grand claims that I'm making here. So this is evident from amputees who have phantom limb pain. So this is where a person has pain in a leg or an arm, they have that amputated and they still have the pain, even though there is no tissue to cause the pain. So this is like really compelling evidence that actually pain is created by our brains. We know that if you, under sort of different hypnosis situations, if a person believes that they are being damaged in some way by sending electric currents through their brain or being touched with a cigarette, even though they're not, but in hypnosis they think they are, then they will experience the pain that you would expect to have if you're in that situation. So we know that our brains can create pain. We know from studies that if you, I think you've probably seen it, it's a really good video, I'll put a link to it actually below this. People who've had like a rubber hand and replaced their hand with a rubber hand, so they've put a screen, rubber hand, screen, their hand, and then it gets to the point where they're hitting the rubber hand with a hammer and they can feel the pain as if it is their real hand. And this is about the brain making these connections and making these interpretations of what the situation is and believing, oh my God, I'm being hit with a hammer, and it creates pain. Yeah, and they feel this and it's real, it's not made up. You know, no one is suggesting for any minute that you're making this up, but this is the science that we understand now. This is the latest understandings in pain science. What we also know is that if you look at scans and x-rays of people, there is no way of knowing from those scans or x-rays who is going to be experiencing pain and who isn't. So from a scan, they may have really worn joints, they may have damage, unless it's a fracture, obviously that's a completely different issue. They may have worn joints, they may have bulging discs, they may have spinal degeneration, they have all of these things, but that doesn't actually mean that in real life they're going to be experiencing pain. So you can't predict it at all. So if therefore those things don't mean pain, then actually that pain isn't about those things. Does that make sense? So if we expected that anybody with a worn joint would experience pain, then that would be pretty much most of the population. Everyone above 20 has got worn joints, yeah? But we're not all in pain. So this is really, really interesting findings. It's quite hard because it's quite entrenched in our societal thinking, isn't it? That, especially even with arthritis, you know, that arthritis is inevitable. You get old, your joints get worn, you have pain. But actually, that's not the mechanism at all. You get old, you have more things going on in your life, you experience pain. The joints are irrelevant. The joints are a bit like getting grey hair, which I know all about these days, but there we are. You know, it's just a normal sign of aging. That's all it is. It's not painful. Other interesting studies, I think they're interesting because I'm a bit of a geek, but other interesting studies is when they've looked at different athletes still have, I think, was it basketball players? Have got loads of them have got damaged cartilage, or it might be the shoulders. One, I can't remember who's who. One's knees, one's shoulders. Really damaged cartilage, but no pain. You know, and it's just a normal part of their day-to-day activity. When they've looked at racing drivers who are experiencing collisions on a really frequent basis, they don't get whiplash. They just don't have it. But interestingly, when they've done a study where they simulated a crash situation with people, and the person believed that the simulation was enough to cause them damage, they developed whiplash, even though that simulation was never, ever going to cause them any damage. It was never enough to create any whiplash symptoms. But those people believe they did. So they were therefore at risk. So it's kind of about, it's not about what's happened, it's about what your beliefs are around it, and also about what they found. Interestingly, with the whiplash people, they could predict in advance who was going to develop whiplash and who wasn't, based on their personality traits. It's really fascinating. And we will come back to that in one moment, because another study I just wanted to mention is when they've looked at nursing students. Again, they could predict who was going to develop back pain by personality traits, and then also looking at what was going on in their lives. So the nursing students who developed pain, they were all doing exactly the same activities, but the ones who had high stress going on in their lives through relationships or whatever were the ones who developed back pain. Fascinating, isn't it? It's not all as straightforward as we've been led to believe. It's not about tissue damage, because if it was, none of this stuff would make sense. And these are the facts. This is the truth. This is kind of what we have learned. And what's the other, I think, even more compelling thing is that when people who have these conditions like herniated disc, like spinal degeneration, like hypermobility, even arthritis, so things that are structural, irreversible, and they've been told they'll never get better from, when they approach it from a mind-body perspective, the pain goes away. And that, to me, that says it all, doesn't it? That says it all. There's more to it than we understand. So what this is all saying is that actually chronic persistent pain is not about structural damage in your body. It is about the messages your brain is creating and sending out. It's about your nervous system being on high alert all the time. So when they've looked at it, about the studies with the nursing students, that was about high levels of stress. With the whiplash, it was about personality traits. Okay, so if you have lots of personality traits like being perfectionist, being very self-critical, being overly responsible, being a people pleaser, being a high achiever, being very driven, all of these things put you under a lot of pressure all the time. And that, over a period of time, all through your life, if you think about it, creates this dysregulation in your nervous system, whereby it's just on high alert. You know, it's highly aroused and it's going, okay, under pressure, under pressure, under pressure. Yeah. So there's the personality traits, there's stressful situations. So if you're under long periods of stress, so at work, in a relationship, could be anything really, or sort of shorter, more severe periods of stress. So if something happens, some traumatic event happens. And one of the things as well that's been looked at a lot is called ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. And these are traumatic events that happen throughout your childhood. And there are massive connections here with ACEs and chronic pain. So ACEs is anything that as a child you felt unable to deal with, you felt overwhelmed by, you were upset by, traumatized by. So it could be things like losing a parent being a drug user, or experiencing abuse, or parent going to prison. You know, it could be big things like this. It can also be smaller things that we consider now as adults, I guess, to be a little bit irrelevant, but actually as a child it's hard to deal with. Stuff like being constantly criticised, being bullied at school. You know, all of these things can have a really significant impact on you as a child, and it goes on then through into your adulthood. And what they've shown is the links between ACEs and physical health and mental health. So people who've experienced one or more ACE are 40, I've got it written down somewhere, 47% more likely to experience chronic pain. So that's, again, it's like this stress response that's running in your body constantly, this dysregulated nervous system that's creating all these symptoms. It's causing your brain to communicate and send these pain messages out on a constant basis. So what you've been doing is trying to deal with the pain from a physical perspective, trying to deal with it as if your body's broken, your body's damaged. So I guess the problem is with that is that you're always thinking your body needs fixing, which puts you under pressure. And the other side of it is that if you're thinking that every time you feel pain you're doing some damage, then that creates a huge fear response, because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't feel pain because then I'll hurt myself, I'll damage myself even more. So I just need to stop and not do anything and not move. And that is hugely restricting and hugely creates a huge fear response. So what we need to do is deal with it from a nervous system perspective, deal with it from your brain's perspective, not from your body's perspective. So you want to change the messages that your brain is sending to your body by regulating your nervous system, by lowering your stress levels. So it's not a one-size-fits-all process for everybody. It's almost like finding all the different bits of a puzzle and dealing with them all, putting them all together. But what we want to be doing is looking at calming your system, calming over your overall nervous system down so that stress response isn't so high. We want to look at dealing with any past events, any ACEs, any traumas you've experienced, and processing those so that that's not causing a dysregulation either of your nervous system. And then looking at day-to-day events and how you're dealing with them, so that if you do have perfectionist tendencies, or you're very self-critical, or you're a massive high achiever, so you're dealing with things differently, learning to deal with stuff differently, so that you're not putting yourself under those levels of pressure. So the important thing to remember is that your body is not damaged. This pain you're experiencing now is not permanent. It is totally, absolutely possible to reverse it and to recover and get to living a pain-free life again. So I have a free ebook that you can download and look through, and it has really simple strategies that you can put in place straight away that's going to help you to start calming your nervous system and start creating that life that you want. Start allowing your brain to send the calmer messages. So I'll put a link below here. If you just sign up to that, then I'll be able to send you a copy out and you can start straight away. If you find this helpful, if you've got any comments, then just put them below, and I'll see you again soon.